Hey class, back with the last video for chapter 9. So without further ado, let's share the screen and get that one going. So today we're going to talk about some of the biopsychosocial issues associated with obesity. First, let's look at obesity as a problem. 65% of Americans are overweight or obese as defined by the BMI or body mass index, and that has to do with your height and weight. And that would include about a third of Missourians being obese. So that's quite a very, very high number. And particularly you can see there in the South, we see very, very high numbers of obesity, and that includes Missouri there. The number of obese children has risen quite dramatically, and we really saw the effects of obesity when it came to the COVID epidemic or pandemic, because we saw that obese people are at far higher risk of health problems when they did get COVID. So it's an issue in the United States, certainly, and all over the world. But particularly high here and has gone up quite a bit. So what are the causes of obesity? Well, to a certain extent, there is genetics, so if your parents are heavy, you will tend to be heavy. At least you will tend to look about their size at their age. And so we see that in twin studies. So if you have one twin that's obese, the other twin it also has a tendency to become obese. It may have a lot to do with the prenatal environment. And so even before the baby is born, pregnant women who eat a high-fat diet will tend to produce babies with a larger lateral hypothalamus. Remember that the lateral hypothalamus is a feeding center. So that seems to be babies who are kind of primed to also eat a lot. But people also vary in metabolic efficiency, and some people burn calories very easily. They have high metabolism, and others burn calories very slowly, and they have a low metabolism. In the apocalypse, those people with the low metabolism will do very well. But when it's not the end of the world, then people with a low metabolism just tend to get fat. And we do see cultures varying in that. So we know that from studies of the Native American group called the Pima in the Southwest, and the Pima had been in Mexico, and they were traditionally normal weight, but once they got to the US and they started eating a lot of high-fat foods, the Pima became very heavy, and it was because their metabolism was very low. They were used to not being around all those kinds of foods. So cultures do vary. There's also a large environmental effect when it comes to obesity. There is essentially, we just have a large availability of inexpensive and convenient high-calorie foods. There's fast food, there's vending machines, there's school cafeterias like ours that just have unlimited abundance of food in front of you. Sodas are a big culprit. People drink a lot of calories in sugar. And then there are a lot of changes to the workplace and changes to children growing up. People are just more sedentary than they used to be. We sit in front of screens all day now, and that wasn't the way it used to be. So it makes some sense now that people are growing more obese just by environmental factors. It turns out that obesity is very hard to treat. And in general, dieting tends to not be very successful in the long term. It might be successful in the short term, and I have friends who go on diets and they lose weight, but in the long term, they have a tendency to gain it back. There are various drugs, but most of them have side effects. There are drugs to decrease meal size or reduce fat absorption. And so, they really haven't found something that works very well in drugs. The surgery is very effective, and they have taken away many of the complications that were previously there with surgery. But what surgery does is that it typically is going to make the size of the stomach smaller. And therefore you're going to increase your feelings of fullness because of the vagus nerve reacting quicker when there's less food in the stomach. And so let's see, that's usually called a gastric bypass. And so another possibility, instead of taking in fewer calories, is to burn off more calories. And exercise programs are effective, but people don't tend to stick with them. So they'll start them for a while and then they'll quit. Dieting and exercise is certainly more effective than dieting alone. So exercise does play an important role, but again, it's very, very difficult to treat obesity in the long term. It really takes changes that last for a lifetime, lifestyle changes that, you know, where you take in fewer calories and you exercise more, and you do that for the rest of your life. And that's very hard for people to do. And that's why a lot of these, you know, like no carb diets are effective in the short term, but who's going to like not eat carbs for the rest of their lives? You know, eventually you're just like, I've got to have some potato chips. So it's very difficult. I want to talk briefly about preventing obesity in children, because there are things that we can do as parents and as adults to prevent obesity in children. One thing is we can do is prepare, offer, and buy healthy foods. You can allow children to choose what they want to eat and how much they want to eat. They do not need to be restricted, as long as you just have healthy foods around. But that means not buying potato chips. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people. And it's also not cost effective, you know, because again, a lot of these unhealthy foods are just really cheap. I mean, I go into Aldi's and I'm like, hey, $1.29 for some barbecue chips, I'll take it. You know what I mean? So I'll take it, right? It's going to fill you up and it's going to taste delicious and it's cheap. Dieting tends to backfire. So people do lose weight on diets, but when they gain it back, they tend to gain even more weight back. And so not encouraging or modeling dieting to children is a good idea. Don't get them involved in dieting. Just put healthy food in front of them and let them eat as much as they want. It doesn't matter how much broccoli they eat. You know what I mean? They're not going to get fat off broccoli. One thing is children's tastes change over time, and it has to do with experience. So if they may taste broccoli the first time and not like it, and they may taste it the second time and not like it, and the third time and the fourth time, you have to keep pushing it on them. They may say, no, I want a hot dog, that's what I want, I'm gonna have a hot dog, I want a hot packet, whatever the hell they are saying there. But keep offering them and keep pushing them to try healthy foods. And eventually they will start to like healthy foods. But the rule of thumb is you've got to try it about 11 times before they actually start liking it. And that's hard for a lot of parents to do, is pushing their kids like that. Try not to punish, reward, or cheer up kids with food, because food's rewards then become tied up with emotional eating and things like that. Be active together. Use the car less. Don't, go up and down the Walmart parking lot looking for a perfect space. Just park far away. Get a little bit more exercise that way. Limiting sedentary activity is really important for kids. And especially now, using, watching videos, sitting there on their phones. Limit that to a couple of hours a day if you can, because otherwise, kids are just not getting enough activity. And remember, brain activity is dependent upon physical activity. And so we need kids to get that kind of stimulation from physical activity. Avoid eating while the TV is on, or while you're watching a video, or while you're watching your phone, because that kind of distracted eating makes us actually eat more. Okay, well, that's all I've got for you on this chapter. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next chapter. Bye-bye.